Every great story needs a villain, not because evil always exists, but because humans need something to point at when things go wrong. Football understands this better than almost any sport on earth. It understands emotion, it understands tribalism, and above all, it understands that anger is easier to control than truth. Football is too big now, too political, too financial, too layered to explain honestly in 90 minutes in a post-match interview. So instead of telling fans the full story, the game gives them something simpler: a face, a name, someone to boo, someone to hate. Because hatred is easy, hatred is loud, and hatred keeps people from asking the wrong questions. This is not a story about bad players or bad referees. This is a story about why football needs villains to survive exactly as it is. This is why football needs villains. This is inside the game. Modern football is not a sport built on fairness. It is a global industry driven by broadcasting deals, geopolitical influence, sponsorship power, and institutional self-preservation. But football cannot present itself that way to fans. The illusion of competition must be protected at all costs. Explaining why certain clubs always compete at the top requires uncomfortable conversations about spending power, access to elite networks, historical favoritism, and regulatory loopholes. Explaining why some referees feel pressured requires talking about media influence, political stakes, and institutional survival. These explanations don't fit into chants, highlight reels, or social media debates, so football simplifies the narrative. It doesn't remove injustice, it disguises it. Complexity becomes character drama. Structural imbalance becomes personal failure. The system remains untouched while individuals take the emotional hit. Villains are not mistakes, they are tools. When your team loses, pain demands an explanation, and not a complicated one. Not something abstract like financial disparity or systemic imbalance. Fans want something immediate, tangible, human. That's where villains come in. Blaming a referee feels better than accepting that your club cannot compete economically. Blaming a rival's dirty tactics feels easier than admitting your team lacks depth. Blaming a star player's ego is more comforting than confronting poor management or ownership failure. Villains protect fans from helplessness. They turn structural powerlessness into emotional release. Football gives supporters an outlet so they never turn their anger upward toward leagues, federations, or governing bodies. Anger, when controlled, is useful. No figure in football absorbs more hatred than the referee, not because referees are uniquely flawed, but because they are uniquely exposed. Referees operate under impossible conditions. Faster games, higher stakes, millions watching, endless replay angles, constant pressure, and yet they are presented as neutral arbiters who must be perfect every second or face public humiliation. They are blamed for VAR confusion. Even though they don't design the system, they are blamed for inconsistency, even though interpretation changes are mandated from above. They are blamed for controversial decisions, even though institutional pressure is never discussed. Referees are football's lightning rods. They exist so fans never ask why decision-making structures are opaque, why accountability stops at the pitch, or why refereeing bodies answer to the same institutions they're meant to regulate. They are the perfect villains: visible, voiceless, disposable. Every generation labels certain players as villains: the diver, the aggressor, the disruptor, the one who ruins the game. But football quietly rewards exactly these traits. Gamesmanship is praised when it's subtle. Physicality is celebrated when it wins trophies. Tactical fouling is accepted when it's committed by the right teams. The line between smart and dirty is never consistent, it's contextual. Players become villains not because of what they do, but because of when and against whom they do it. Once labeled, everything they touch is interpreted through suspicion. Intent is assumed. Reputation becomes reality. These players distract attention away from how the game is actually played, at elite level calculated, ruthless, and unsentimental. Calling individuals immoral keeps the sport morally clean. Football also needs institutional villains, clubs that win too much, clubs that rise too fast, clubs that disrupt tradition. They are framed as soulless, artificial, bad for football. Sometimes those criticisms contain truth. But notice what's always missing. Leagues that approved ownership changes, federations that signed off on financial models, broadcasters that benefited from global attention. The club becomes the villain so the system doesn't have to answer questions. Fans fight each other while governance remains invisible. Hatred moves horizontally instead of upward. The narrative ensures that no matter how powerful a club becomes, it's always the bad guy in your story, protecting the structures that actually control football from scrutiny. Football markets stars aggressively until those stars gain too much influence. Once a player becomes bigger than their club, narratives shift. Confidence becomes arrogance. Ambition becomes disloyalty. Negotiating power becomes greed. Superstars are allowed to shine, but never to challenge the structure. When they do, media tone changes. Whispers start. Stories leak. Public perception turns. The villain is not necessarily bad, but inconvenient. Hatred is selective. Football does not attack the powerful, faceless institutions. It attacks the visible individual who threatens emotional equilibrium. The star becomes a symbol of everything fans are allowed to hate, while the deeper levers of power remain untouchable and invisible. International football intensifies villain creation because identity is involved. Matches are framed as cultural clashes. Incidents are magnified into national insults. One tackle becomes decades of resentment. One celebration becomes disrespect. Fans are encouraged to hate opponents not as players, but as symbols. National narratives mask structural issues in football governance. Federations mismanage funds, exploit players, or bow to political pressure. Yet anger is always redirected at the opposing nation, not the institution. Rivalry keeps scrutiny away from power. Hatred is transformed into patriotism, and football ensures the focus stays on emotion and narrative, not on the systems quietly shaping the sport behind the scenes. Media doesn't just report football, it manufactures its villains. Headlines exaggerate, cameras linger on moments designed to provoke outrage, and pundits dissect every misstep as evidence of character flaws. A tackle becomes malicious. A gesture becomes arrogant. One interview becomes a scandal. The truth is rarely the story. Narratives are crafted to keep audiences watching, sharing, reacting. The system doesn't fear fans questioning structures. It fears fans not caring. By labeling certain players, clubs, or nations as villains, the media ensures anger is channeled correctly. The villain is always visible. The real puppeteers remain in the shadows, untouched, silently dictating the game. Social media accelerates villain creation like nothing before. One clip goes viral and lives forever. Fans don't just watch the game. They judge it, dissect it, weaponize it. Every mistake is amplified. Every celebration is scrutinized. Algorithms reward outrage, engagement, and conflict. A single moment can define a career, creating villains overnight. Unlike traditional media, these narratives are permanent. They are searchable, replayable, memed, and retweeted endlessly. Footballers live under constant surveillance, and fans develop collective memory shaped by emotion, not context. Social media doesn't just report villains, it freezes them in time, making hatred immediate, perpetual, and impossible to escape. Yet the system is selective. Certain players, clubs, and nations are protected, almost untouchable. Talent, marketability, or alignment with league and sponsor interests grants immunity. Their errors are explained, forgiven, or reframed as genius or ambition. No amount of arrogance or failure brands them as a villain. They exist above the judgment fans and media-directed others. In football, visibility is dangerous. Alignment is safety. The system decides who is allowed to fail publicly and who is shielded. Villainy is a tool, not a punishment. Some fall into it by accident, others are never permitted near it, and that is the real story behind every villain you see. Imagine football without villains. No boos, no hatred, No us versus them. At first it sounds peaceful, but it would also feel empty. Rivalries would lose their fire. Matches would lose their edge. Villains give football emotional gravity. Someone to resist, someone to blame, someone to fear. Without them, tension disappears. The game becomes sterile, polite, predictable. Football doesn't survive on skill alone. It survives on emotion. Villains concentrate chaos into human form so the system remains untouched. Remove the villain, and uncomfortable questions follow. Who benefits? Who controls outcomes? Who writes the rules? Villains don't exist to ruin football. They exist to protect it, or rather, to protect the illusion fans are meant to believe. Believing in villains is comforting. It simplifies a complex system into heroes and enemies. But the cost is awareness. Fans spend energy hating individuals instead of questioning institutions. They argue over referees instead of rule-making bodies. They attack players instead of ownership models. The anger goes sideways, never upward. That misdirection is priceless to those in power. While fans fight online, the system remains unchanged. While debates rage about personality, decisions about money access and control happen quietly. Believing in villains doesn't just distort reality, it delays reform. The longer fans are emotionally invested in fictional enemies, the longer football's real structures operate without resistance. And that may be the most effective control mechanism the game has ever created. You think you're watching football, but you're watching theater. The pitch is a stage. The players are characters. The villains are necessary roles in a story designed to keep you watching, talking, choosing sides. Beneath the 90 minutes is a carefully balanced ecosystem of power, money, and influence. Outcomes matter, but narratives matter more. Rivalries are amplified. Hatred is cultivated. Emotion is harvested. This isn't accidental. It's intentional. Because a fan questioning refereeing structures or financial hierarchies is dangerous, a fan screaming at a villain is harmless. Once you understand this, football changes forever. Not because it's less beautiful, but because you finally see who the game is really being played for. The villain you hate isn't the problem. They never were. They are the mass football put on the system so you wouldn't see what's underneath. And once you understand that, the boosts sound different, the outrage feels rehearsed, the narratives feel controlled. Football doesn't eliminate injustice. It redirects your anger away from it. And once you see the villain for what it truly is, you stop hating the pawn and start seeing the board. This is inside the game. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.